afternoon. How you doing? Good. Okay, we're going to get started. So if you can please proceed with your testimony.
Members of City Council, I am Adam Teal, Fire Commissioner. Joining me today are Craig Murphy, Deputy Commissioner, and Tara Moore, our Chief of Staff. I'm pleased to provide testimony on the Fire Department's Fiscal Year 2020 operating budget. The mission of the Philadelphia Fire Department is to serve the public by providing comprehensive all-hazards prevention, risk reduction, and emergency response, and to ensure the health and safety of our members. In Fiscal Year 2020, the PFD anticipates further restoring and strengthening our capabilities. The Department will continue to execute nearly $20 million in competitive federal grants that will provide incident command training, improve shipboard firefighting and water rescue capabilities, and ultimately reopen 7 fire companies closed during the recession. Also in FY2020, we have embraced the Mayor and Council's commitment to narrowing the gap by offering EMT courses to city residents and providing participants with a gateway into our eds and meds economy.
Good.
Subject to your questions?
Oh,
that
great.
concludes my opening statement.
Wow, I like summarized testimony. Thank you. Well, thank you, and again, thank you all for your service. Riveting ceremony down at the plaza. Okay, so this is a general question. Piker released its third quarter city overtime update today. It states the fire department has increased its overtime spending by $11.5 million over the same period last year, by far the highest increase among city departments. It appears the department has been slow to fill vacant positions, requiring overtime to maintain minimum staffing levels and train new hires. Can you explain that to me, particularly since it appears you have around 283 vacancies? Can you talk
Right, Mr. President, I think there are a lot of issues that go into filling those vacant positions. Of course, the time to train a firefighter is about 9 months. So it takes 9 months. We have approximately 200 firefighter cadets who are in the training academy right now. Mm-hmm. Our training academy is severely constrained by its size and our ability, basically space there. It hasn't been updated in decades. So we're actually having to take those firefighter cadets to Lower Bucks County to do some of their training. As you can imagine, that causes us some logistical challenges. So it is, despite our best efforts, and I think you can rest assured that we are training firefighter cadets and paramedics as fast as we possibly can. We are hiring paramedics now every quarter. We continue to be challenged. A number of those vacancies are paramedic vacancies. About half of those vacancies are for paramedics. We're challenged to compete in the market for paramedics. There's a state shortage of paramedics. There's a regional shortage of paramedics. And of course, there's a citywide shortage of paramedics. So we're really challenged to, and paramedics are pre-certified. So they really do have to do that essentially 6 months to a year, depending on how they do a training course on their own. One of the reasons we've embraced this idea of providing EMT training, the first reason is really just to help out with the broader workforce development initiatives. But the second reason is to help our own pipeline and create a pathway for folks to basically become EMTs and then eventually become paramedics. We think we're going to have to do some things very differently to be able to recruit, hire, and retain paramedics, and that accounts for a lot of our shortages right now.
Okay, so can you give me some recommendations on how we deal with this issue, understanding, and I know we've had some prior discussions about the facility, starting with the facility, its limitations, and starting with the challenges associated with identifying candidates. What are we going to do, or what would you recommend that we do in all aspects of being able to identify?
So I think we are doing everything that we can do within the limits of our current resources. And again, we do have those.
And when I say we, I mean the collective we.
I appreciate that.
Not asking just you.
We're working with the Department of Public Property on the next phase of the master plan for the Fire Academy. Mm-hmm. And we think, or we hope, that we're going to be able to accomplish some phasing so we can move across that site in a way that's going to give us some additional capacity and let us train our own without having to go elsewhere. So that's one thing we're doing. We're also continuing to work with public property on the site of our new logistics hub, which again, council supported last year. So far, we have not been able to secure a site and get that project actually moving forward, but I think we're very close with a potential site. And once we have that, that'll give us another place to do training and do the field training component, so we can really devote the academy entirely to training cadets, new firefighters, new paramedics, new EMTs. We're also looking at a spot elsewhere in the city. We're in the beginning of negotiations to hold these training courses for residents for EMT. And we think that'll take a little bit of the pressure off the academy as well. But again, that's another cooperative effort with the Department of Public Property. Our recruiting efforts for firefighters have continued unabated. Firefighter applications open on May 6th and will close on July 26th. We've had some great success with OHR now in that process. And again, we've actually added recruitment resources to our recruiting unit. We have a full-time paramedic lieutenant in our recruiting unit, a battalion chief, and a new captain position there. Because while the process overall is managed under the auspices of the Civil Service Commission by OHR, the recruitment piece is something we're putting a lot of investment into, so we can at least keep our pipeline full of both firefighters, where we're not having an issue. The issue with firefighters is simply the time it takes to train somebody from start to finish to be a firefighter EMT. Remember that all of our firefighters are also emergency medical technicians, and the resources that we have around that. That's also what's driving some of our overtime. The good news is we have 200 firefighter cadets. The bad news is, despite continued investment and support from mayor and council over the past couple of years, when we train firefighter cadets, we have to bring people out of the field, pay overtime to fill their spots and minimum staffing, and again, pay for them to train the cadets. So this is, again, going to be a little bit, we're still going to be in this bubble until we're able to sort of catch up and get ahead of the curve. Paramedics is a little bit more intractable. It's been good that we've been able to recruit quarterly. Again, we're just having real challenges competing, and it's not so much, if you look at it on paper, some of it is, wages and hours were probably competitive with a lot of our peer jurisdictions in the area. The challenge is those hours during their assigned shift, our paramedics are working essentially 100% of the time because our system is so busy. So the 5 peak time medic units that are proposed in this budget will help us change our supply and demand profile for having the service out there. And again, that, however, since EMS demand continues to rise, we're not sure that's going to meaningfully change the number, the amount of time that our medics are actually providing hands-on patient care. So long story short, someone who's certified as a paramedic can come work here and be working literally every minute of their 12-hour shift without having time for a break, without having time to eat, or they can go work in one of our peer jurisdictions where they'll work essentially 25 to 50% of the time that they're on shift and have time to do, all of those sort of normal things that people do at work.
Okay, so let's talk about the facility. So you have one site that the city is currently under negotiations with acquiring the site. Is that my understanding?
Those are all, frankly, Mr. President, questions for the Department of Public Property. We work with the Department of Public Property to do this. We're sort of we're a tenant or a prospective tenant in some cases, and the ins and outs are really something that they do.
So we need to, okay. I mean, I understand that your role is to fight fires and provide services to individuals, not to build facilities or because if that directly relates to our staffing issues, then clearly we want to figure that out. In terms of the recruiting process, so you say that we're comparable in pay, I'm assuming?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on the jurisdiction. I think the challenge is, regardless of the hour-for-hour pay, the challenge is in the course of that 12-hour period of time, our paramedics are, the term of art that we have is unit hour utilization. So our that ranges from 0 to 1. 1 is 100%. So the time that our paramedics are on duty, they are committed to an incident for 100% of the time. And it's a range, but most of our units are 100% utilized. In other jurisdictions that have higher supply than demand, so we're actually under our ability to service the EMS demand every day. We don't have enough units to supply that, so that is really what creates the 100% utilization. If you go to, jurisdiction X, they have twice as many medic units as they have incidents. So then that would be 50% utilization where we're at 100. And as a result, those providers are, doing other things during their time. They're doing training on duty. They're eating while they're on standby, again, just like us. They're doing physical fitness things. They're de-stressing. Again, it's a very stressful job. So it's difficult for us to compete with that kind of, so even if wages and hours are comparable, the working conditions are very different. And again, that's a testament to our EMS providers. I mean, they're the most dedicated folks in this business I've ever seen, because they are out there literally rendering care 24/7, 365. There's this misconception about downtime, and that's just not something that is a reality for our Philadelphia paramedics. And many of our EMS units are staffed by firefighter EMTs who are either detailed from the normal assignment or working overtime. That's the only way that we can meet the demand right now. Again, we're looking at a lot of things. First and foremost, doing whatever we can to create a better pipeline here in the city. I don't think, when you look at the context of a statewide and a regional paramedic shortage, I still think we're going to have to think a little bit differently. So we've also invested more in our Randolph Skills Academy program, our Explorers. Another thing we're going to do with some additional space in the city is be able to hopefully expand our Explorers program and do whatever we can to kind of grow our own first emergency medical technicians and ultimately paramedics, or firefighter EMTs and firefighter paramedics. That's another thing we're looking at. We also have a program that just started this year. It's been something we've been working on to take our own fire service EMTs, our single role EMTs, and bridge them up to being full-fledged paramedics. Now that process takes 12 to 18 months because they're working while they're learning. And I think, again, given additional space and facilities and frankly additional overtime to use the instructors, it's possible we can bridge some more of our folks up, even if they're firefighter EMTs, to becoming paramedics, which is another thing that some of our peer jurisdictions do. So we're leaving no stone unturned. The reality is it's a very challenging position to fill. And again, it's an absolute credit to the men and women who work in the Philadelphia Fire Department now that we're keeping those units out there rolling. And when you have folks who basically are saying that there's too much overtime, that's a signal that, that because they're working so much, this is not something they're going in and, sitting around playing checkers at the firehouse. They're out there running calls 24/7, 365, and it's a tougher place than anywhere else in the country that I've seen.
Right, okay. In the budget detail on page 20, in your testimony, there's a $4 million contract described as EMS billing and collections. Can you describe the purpose of the contract, what percentage of EMS services are for uninsured Philadelphia citizens, and how many uninsured Philadelphians are in collections for EMS services?
So, Mr. President, the contract is actually, we outsource our billing. We bill for EMS transports, and that's outsourced to a contractor, a private vendor, and they take a percentage of what they collect. Historically, we've collected about 25% or a quarter of what we bill. The specifics of percentage of uninsured residents that we would have to get back to you with those specific data.
So you say you collect what, 25%?
20 some odd percent of what we bill, which again is,
wow,
roughly between $40 and $50 million. So we bill a lot, and we collect, much less than we bill. And again, we don't, the way that we bill is different than some creditors. It's a soft billing approach because, again, we see our public policy direction as being a public good versus operating something as a business.
Right.
So we do whatever we can in a business-like fashion. However, we're not asking people for insurance cards. We're not asking them for willingness or ability to pay when they're having a medical emergency.
Right. Okay. So you have an $8.3 million budget on the airport as part of the aviation fund. Can you tell me what your relationship is with the airport and what the fire department's role is? I think I have a sense, but can you give me the specifics on what it is?
Yes, sir. The Philadelphia Fire Department provides the FAA mandated fire protection to Philadelphia International Airport. So we are the provider of the mandated fire protection to keep that airport open. If it were not for the Philadelphia firefighters who are there, the airport would literally not operate. They'd be out of compliance with FAA regulations. We also, while it's not regulated by the FAA, we also provide the service to give fire protection and emergency medical care in the terminals. And again, that's an activity that we perform as part of an arrangement with the airport where they cover the cost of those services out of the aviation fund.
So that's funded out of the aviation.
Yes, sir.
Are you the sole responder for the airport, or do they have I understand this.
We are the sole provider of the FAA mandated services. We're generally the sole provider in the terminals. It is possible because, of course, the way that Tenneco Township has part of the airport in
Right.
Cargo City, we may or may not be the only responder, although we are obviously the closest, and we have the most depth of any response agency to protect the airport.
We're better, right? Yes. I know you can't say that, but you can't.
We've had a great relationship with, Shelley, we've had a great relationship with aviation,
Right.
and they're continuing to reinvest in the airport rescue and firefighting component at the airport.
Right. Let me ask you this, you may or may not know this. So the city of Philadelphia owns the airport. If the airport was private, would the city of Philadelphia's fire department still be required as an FAA mandate, or would the airport have to have its own?
The mandate has nothing to do with who provides the service. So that for the airport to remain open, the FAA requires a certain level of aircraft rescue and firefighting protection. Hypothetically, a private entity could choose to do that by contracting with the Philadelphia Fire Department, by creating their own fire department, by contracting with somebody else. And around the world or around the U.S., it's done in all of those different ways. Every way you can possibly imagine is a way that's done. The good thing about the way that it's done here, in places where they simply provide, they create an entity to provide just the FAA mandated component. As you can imagine, in a worst case scenario, the surrounding jurisdictions end up subsidizing the larger response.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that really not even in the worst case scenario. If you have any type of incident besides being on standby, then the surrounding jurisdictions would get pulled in. You can imagine the magnitude of an aircraft incident. So for us, this arrangement gives the airport the depth of coverage, reaching all the way back into the fire department and our Office of Emergency Management and all the other supporting entities that are part of the broader city government.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to raise one question. The Council President brought it up. I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle. On the billing for emergency services. When that policy was first instituted, there was concern raised that there would be certain individuals, because they knew now they might have to pay, that they would be hesitant to call, and maybe, the chest pain may be indigestion instead of a heart attack, that kind of thing. And that was well before you were here. Has that been an issue? I haven't heard it raised recently. Is that still a concern out there, that there might be some residents reluctant to call for services because of the billing issue?
Council member, while it's hard to
Right.
know what's going on in everybody's mind when they
Sure.
make those kinds of decisions, our demand for emergency medical services continues to rise at around 2 to 3% per year.
Okay, that was
So-
going to be my next
So
question.
certainly people are calling. I think
Right.
it's a very legitimate concern, and I share it. Actually, over the years there have been these ideas that we could somehow, and I'll put this in air quotes, discourage, or inverted commas, discourage people
Right.
from calling 911, and I've been and I have not really been on board with those efforts because we don't want people to have any reason if they feel like they're having, remember that a heart attack can masquerade as a lot of different types of pain.
Sure.
So we want people to call 911 if they ever think they're having a medical emergency, certainly if they ever see any kind of injury. We don't want them to be thinking about whether or not it's a legitimate complaint and whether or not they're able to pay.
And again, I know it's hard to determine, as you said. I was just wondering, and you kind of answered the question by saying they have increased a little bit, which I guess indicates that maybe there isn't that hesitancy, which is...
I'm sure there are people. My sense is there are, certainly I think our data suggests there are folks who, because they're not able to access primary care because of their ability to pay,
Right.
or they have challenges getting to primary care, we tend to think we are seeing higher acuity patients. So remember that we are part of the broader healthcare system.
Sure.
So to the extent the broader healthcare system is strong, that changes our demand profile for the better. To the extent it's not, we're sort of the safety net. I will say also, and as we close out fiscal year 2019, we have finally been able to, again, great partnership with Budget, great partnership with Philadelphia Public Health. We now have a full-time analytics shop, including an epidemiologist, to look at opioid-related incidents, but also look at how that fits in the broader healthcare system. So I think we're going to be able to get some better answers to those questions over time, and we're looking forward to that.
Great, thanks. And as far as response time, and again, something I haven't heard complaints about recently, so I guess that's good, but how much has that changed in your response time to issue? Up, down, whatever?
Well, our response times are still, Councilmember, not what we would want them to be, not what our goals are, and that's really a consequence of the increasing service demand.
Right.
And the challenges that we have adding resources. Again, keeping up with that is one of the reasons that you see the proposed 5 peak time medic units. That'll give us a total of 60 during the day, 50 at night, and that really is that's all about response time. So to the extent that we have, all of the things being equal, so if demand doesn't go down, which it does not appear to be doing,
Sure.
We have to have additional units to supply that demand. The other thing we're doing, though, we've had some great success with alternative response units. We had a pilot program with Penn that's taken, and Councilman Blackwell's familiar with this, we've taken 100 transports offline thanks to that agreement with Penn.
Great.
We just rolled out our second unit in the Kensington area, and just in its very first day, really during the soft rollout, we took 4 ambulance transports that didn't happen. That leaves those units available for other calls.
I wasn't aware of that, but obviously working with private entities helps, One last thing. You mentioned the reopening of the fire companies closed during the recession. Where is the plan to reopen all of them, or is there still some that are not, or are there some that you don't see reopening for whatever reason?
The 5-year plan contemplates reopening all 7 of those companies, and they're
Okay.
located in different neighborhoods across the city.
Right.
The original grant that we wrote was to reopen all of those companies at one time. We're currently working with our budget office and FEMA to identify if there's another way to phase in those companies because of our constraints around the facilities and the apparatus to provide that. So it's an ongoing negotiation with FEMA and our budget office. That said, roughly 125 of those 200 firefighter cadets that are in the academy now were provided through that grant. So the personnel to reopen all 7 companies are actually in our academy right now.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you. And again, I think the fire department does a great job. Thank you all for the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to say thank you as well. I've been around here long enough and remember when a mentally ill young lady climbed up on a roof when there was a fire, and it was one of those times where we had a fire station a block away closed, and she died. And some things you can't forget. So I am especially appreciative of the commitment to try to get them all open and try to do what we can always, and being available for all the social service aspects of your position as well. It means everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'm finished.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner, thank you, and thank you to your team for being here. And working with the Philadelphia Fire Department over the past couple of years and going through the budget, I'm happy to see that the fire department is getting the resources that it has long waited for, and it's been a long time. I don't think we've seen an increase in the fire budget as we've seen over the past 2.5 years in over 2 decades. So it's a significant investment and priority to the city from your submittal and the mayor's commitment along with council, ensuring that our response times are cut down and minimized, and people and property remain to be safe in the most efficient way. So I'm happy to hear that. Before I get into, I have more of my questioning today on EMS, because I think you got a pretty good grapple on some of the, with the department and changing shifts with EMS. And, Councilman Greenlee just mentioned about, and I wasn't sure about opening closed firehouses or engines as, were the brownouts. So we ended the brownouts, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the brownout policy has ended, I think, in the beginning of
It
your
actually,
tenure, right?
this
2 years ago,
administration
3
ended
years
it even
ago?
before I arrived. So it was the
So,
brownout policy. Was
in the
in
beginning of
before I
this administration, one of the first things we did was we ended the brownouts, which unfortunately, from Councilwoman's Blackwell's account, may have been a tragedy as a result of it. You had mentioned that in this budget, proposed budget, that 7 houses are going to reopen. I thought it was like 5 with 3 and 2 ladders, 3 houses or companies. It's a little complicated for me. I get confused.
It is complicated.
And then we started the process, I thought, in February, in reopening an engine or a ladder or a house or a company. Did we not start the process of opening up a closed house?
Councilman,
or a company?
it's a great question. The start of the process, this sort of circles back to what President Clark was asking. The start of the process is hiring those 130 some odd firefighters who at the end of 9 months will be able to allow us to open the first of those fire companies. So that the start of the process and the start of the grant performance period was in February, and that's when they were hired, and we started that cadet academy. So those firefighters will become available, new firefighters will become available to go into our minimum staffing in the November timeframe.
All 212 or
Well,
a majority of them?
We need 120 at minimum to reopen the 7 fire companies, 5 engines and 2 ladders. Keep in mind that all of our fire companies also provide emergency medical services. So all of those folks who graduate are firefighter EMTs. They're all emergency medical technicians as well. So restoring those companies, those all hazards fire companies, gives us both fire and EMS capability. But the next step in the process is when they graduate, how are they deployed? And the phasing of that is what we're, again, currently discussing with FEMA and the budget office.
So I think the council president had mentioned about staffing, like I guess a reduction in staff. Is that because we haven't actually gone through the academy yet, or with the reduction of over 300 staff? Because I have here on the budget, like, neighborhood fire protection, is that, what is that? Is that
So
your-
we've added,
your fire-
when you see it in the budget, that means the position's been added. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean that that position is available to provide service on a minimum staffed emergency response unit. So for instance, we have 200, what would appear to be vacancies,
Correct.
but they're vacancies in our minimum staffing, so they're not available to staff a unit on any given day, which means we have to use overtime to fill those vacancies. But they are actually on our books and in the academy for 9 months, or if they're paramedics, if we're fortunate enough to hire them as paramedics.
That's it. So you just got a line item for your, class 100 then, is basically, but it's for
Well,
personnel.
the-
Until they are able to fill the position upon graduating from the academy.
Right, and
Is
that really covers us for the firefighter EMTs. The challenge we still have is in recruiting, hiring, and retaining single-role paramedics. That's what the statewide shortage, regional shortage, and the discussion that we had earlier.
So what is the difficulty recruiting paramedics? Is it are you considering, okay, so one, I guess, they work a lot, right? And there's a lot of overtime, and we corrected some of that with the rotations, right? With city council, you proposed a change in the schedule for to mirror the firefighters.
Right,
in-
Councilmember.
in
We
their-
put everybody back on the same shift schedule, which,
Shift
we, qualitatively is helping to unify the department and hopefully helps with some of those intangible reasons that we've had challenges recruiting paramedics. At the end of the day, however, the workload profile hasn't changed, so those paramedics, for their duration of their 12-hour shift, they are doing hands-on patient care or in the hospital for the entire 12-hour shift, where in a lot of our peer jurisdictions, they are only doing that for 4 hours in a 12-hour period, or at most 5 hours in a 12-hour
And
period.
what's the salary benefit package comparable to some of the out-of-county paramedics?
Well, I think if you look at what and again, everybody's hiring because there's a hiring shortage. If you look at it simply in terms of pay and benefits, we are as or more attractive on simply a pay and benefits standpoint. But you're going to come here and work, and during that 12-hour shift, you're going to be doing hands-on patient care, the most challenging aspect of our job, for the entire shift, where in other jurisdictions, you might be doing that at most for 50% of your time at work.
How many EMS runs do we average in a year, or have you
We
logged in for last year?
right now we average 700 to 800 EMS incidents every 24 hours. And in the summer, actually, we had 1,000. We'll do 1,000 EMS incidents a day, every 24 hours over the summer. And when I say that to people who are not from Philadelphia, who are either from Philadelphia or who are in the fire and EMS service and not from Philadelphia, they gasp.
Understandably. And so we're having a little bit of an issue trying to recruit, but it's the first time we've had open class for paramedics in some time. Is that correct, or has it just been
No, sir.
a struggle?
We continue. We're hoping the shift schedule change will bear fruit. We've again put a full-time paramedic lieutenant in our recruiting unit. At the end of the day, though, I mean, I think our sense is until the workload meaningfully changes to be on par with some of those competitors, then I tend to think it's going to be a challenge, all other things being equal.
Is the department or the city, having any discussions about a temporary lift of residency requirement for paramedics to recruit?
So as we
Could we?
as we look around the region, we see other agencies in the same boat that we are as far as recruiting and retaining. They're all hiring, and there is a statewide report that the Bureau of Emergency Medical Services in Harrisburg developed on the statewide shortage of paramedics. There's also a regional shortage of paramedics. So this isn't something that's simply confined to the city and county of Philadelphia, that shortage. Again, I think our challenge is the workload, which is one of the reasons why, again, as I think the council president said earlier, everything is connected. So the 5 peak time medic units that are in the budget will hopefully, provided demand doesn't rise too much, will hopefully help us start to lower that unit hour utilization. Some of our alternative response unit pilots, the 2 I mentioned, will hopefully start to lower that unit hour utilization, and that's good. That's really the final component that we would need to be on par with other jurisdictions.
So in the vein of increased load and more houses or stations or ladders or companies coming online, and do we have enough supervisors and battalion chiefs to cover the EMS incidents that we have? So if you have a deputy commissioner or a deputy chief and a battalion chief that's responsible for X amount of ratio, whatever the ratios are that's required per EMS run or vehicles. I think it's like, what is it? You have to have, 1 to 7 for some sort of supervision?
Well, that's the outer limit for effective span of control in a high-risk setting.
All right, so do we have enough, as the fire department has enough for multiple incidents to have battalion chiefs or those types of command that'll they'll be able to cover the city at one time?
Councilmember, that's one I can happily say that during fiscal year 19, we were able to restore 1 division and 2 battalions that were also cut in years past. So that, as well as bring online finally our assistant chiefs that were funded a couple years ago. So we now do have, we're much closer to an effective span of control than we've ever been before, and we've actually needed those supervisors, those additional. We had a 4-alarm fire that many of you saw in Port Richmond, and if it were not for those additional battalion chiefs that we had in the street, we would have had to call people back using overtime to help give us the right capacity.
Do we have, how many battalion chiefs do we have on EMS, in the EMS battalion chiefs?
Well, the supervisor deployment is a little bit different. So again, part of the shift schedule change was to reunify the chains of command. So we are no longer operating under 2 parallel chains of command, which was very inefficient. The EMS chain of command was very under-resourced. So now, again, we provide fire, EMS, and all the other services. So now it's 1 chain of command, where we've added, in just the past year, 4 assistant chiefs, so that's 1 on each platoon. 4 deputy chiefs, that's an additional division, and another 8 battalion chiefs, which is a battalion chief on each platoon. And we also have...
That's on the fire side, right?
So that, Councilmember, that's what I'm sort of trying to get across. There is we don't have sides anymore. On any given day, 25 to 50% of our ambulances are actually staffed by firefighter EMTs who are either detailed or working on overtime. If we have a mass casualty incident, the incident commander will be a deputy chief, period, full stop. So we do have some EMS deputy chiefs. Again, that's something that we did over the past 3 years. We have 1 EMS deputy chief on each platoon to sort of manage the administrative aspects. I think the bigger question about supervisors is, it's really related to our, overall footprint as we add those 7 companies. Again, we feel we're ready for that with the supervisors we added last year. The challenge with adding additional EMS supervisors is everybody we take out of a medic unit and create as an EMS supervisor means 1 more position that we have to fill in that medic unit to provide hands-on patient care.
We're growing our EMS unit.
Well, that's what's proposed, is that we grow another 5 peak time units.
Right, so we have 55 and we're going to grow to 60.
That'll bring us to 60.
Right.
Again, keep in mind that what that will look like on July 1st, given our continued challenges recruiting paramedics, is another 10 firefighter EMTs staffing those units on overtime so we don't run out of medic units on that day. It's all related.
I just want to, make sure for the record, only because I've been working a little closer with EMS, and I certainly am no means a part of your system and have the expertise and sort of thing. I just want to make sure that, we have the proper supervisors and, citywide, as you call it, maybe it's just old school battalion chief, kind of how things used to be, but that, when the EMS department, when we grow up to 60 apparatuses and our runs increase and we decrease the response time, that at any given time we have the proper level, at the battalion level, kind of supervision. And then I'm not talking about, even if it's adding a supervisory position. I just think that the EMS part of the department that you say that you're kind of merging into one has been neglected for a long time. So I'm happy that you're addressing, right, and that the department is focusing in a priority on EMS. So that I think is very, very good news. We haven't seen in a long time. I just want to make sure that everything kind of grows together.
Yeah, Councilman, it's a great point, and one of the real benefits from a management standpoint of that shift schedule change is it allows the units to be staffed and managed with a much better span of control, and it allows our single role EMS supervisors to really be focused on clinical care and clinical excellence, and will help us retain the EMS license that we just had restored last year.
And again, forgive me for not being correct and knowledgeable on all the term, the rank and the protocols. But you have deputy chiefs that has assistant chiefs, or you have new assistant supervisors,
assistant
right?
chief is the
on
highest
the fire
civil
side,
service.
But you don't on the EMS side. You don't, right? So
it's the same. I
I
guess
know
that's
it's-
the shift schedule
I know it's
change.
the same, but
right.
you don't have assistants though, right? That for people who are supervising the paramedics or EMS.
The assistant chiefs supervise the entire fire department workforce that is on duty at any given time.
And that includes EMS.
Fire and EMS providers. Again, keep in mind that what we historically have thought of as being quote unquote EMS, actually right now is being provided 25 to 50%, depending on the day, by firefighter emergency medical technicians.
Do we have data on runs, incidents? What would you describe as an incident? Just a run to a house?
No, it's a great point. Actually, a run is a vehicle movement, so we
Right.
have more runs than incidents. An incident is actually, for an EMS job, what we would call a shoe run. An EMS incident is one patient, but that one incident, that one patient may generate 3 vehicle runs. So for instance, we send the nearest fire engine, staffed by firefighter EMTs. Then we send the nearest ambulance, staffed either by a combination of a single role paramedic or EMT and or a firefighter EMT. And we might send the nearest EMS supervisor, who basically is by themselves in a vehicle. So that's 3 runs for one incident.
Do we have a breakdown on how many runs to a home that led into a transport to a hospital? And for those who do not?
We do. We can get back to you on the percentage of incidents that generate a transport.
Right. Okay. That'll be good. So you start off, talking about EMT courses to residents. I know we have partnered, and it's been extremely successful in as partners creating a program called Act Now, and I'm going to put it in the layman's terms, right? Act Now is the action of somebody acting at that moment as a confident and informed Good Samaritan, if that's a good way to put it.
Absolutely.
That is the only way that I can describe it. So we trained in partners over 1,000 people in my district alone with CPR certifications. We've also, to date, gone into our schools with a modified version with just introductory to EMS or CPR, AED, stop the bleed, some of the community risk reduction, the department that you have in its outreach and program. So we're able to utilize that together. And we've reached, to date, in 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in my district, over 3,500 children and students, and also another 5,000 residents since last year, just on the modified introductory course. So that's going real well. Is the EMT course to residents, is that something separate that your community risk reduction department is engaged in, or is that something that is that the program that we partnered with?
That's actually what we're talking about doing is, and talking with a number of different partners about doing, is a full emergency medical technician course, which generally full-time takes 1 to 2 months to be a full-fledged emergency medical technician.
Okay.
Like the EMTs that are also firefighters who are on
they the national EMT?
There's a national, it's a state, it's regulated by the State Bureau of EMS, but they use the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians, so it is a national certification. To your point, we know that's going to benefit Philadelphia, but those folks are going to end up with a credential that they can use around the country.
Okay, well, we want them to stay here and try to recruit them and
No,
have them
absolutely,
get into
absolutely.
a paramedic school. Do we have, what kind of training do we do for paramedics? I know we don't have our own paramedic school.
Well, now we sort of, again, another
Yeah.
one of the things that we've accomplished in the past year that we worked on for a couple of years is we do have an arrangement with Tower Health at Chestnut Hill Hospital where we worked with them to create a bridge program from EMT to paramedic. Right now, that enrollment in that program is limited to our own fire service EMTs who we're bridging up to being paramedics. That's again a 12 to 18 month process. I actually do hope that eventually the EMT training that we're doing as part of the broader efforts to address workforce gaps in the city will get us to a place where we're able to train paramedics. Right now, we only hire pre-certified paramedics, so you have to go somewhere else to get that paramedic training.
What is the cost for that kind of training?
The
Roughly,
cost for
I mean,
that
I
varies
guess
so
it
widely,
varies,
Councilman.
right?
Yeah.
On the low end, $10,000, $12,000?
I couldn't even speculate. The way, I was trained as a paramedic at George Washington University, and I can only imagine how many zeros were after that. And there are private providers that do it for something less than that.
So it's expensive.
It can be expensive, yes.
But it also might be a way to ensure the proper, or the amount of recruits that we're looking for to fill the need, so we can.
Councilmember, you're exactly right. In the long run, I would love for us to, and again, we're working on the two ends of the pipeline first, and then we'll build out the middle. I would love for, a kid who has never thought of being in the fire department or being an emergency medical services provider to take one of our EMT classes, and then we're able to hire that person. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a younger person. I mean, this is a profession that certainly, there's no age limit. So somebody can become an emergency medical technician through one of our programs, and then instead of now having to hire pre-certified paramedics, we're able to take that person and move them through the full spectrum of EMS training, and actually that's what we're looking at too, whether that's through an apprenticeship type program or whatever that might be, however we can make that work. I absolutely agree with you that part of this is going to be building our own paramedics from start to finish.
I think it's a good opportunity for workforce training and diversity to really hire and recruit. We're trying to recruit from Philadelphians in all our neighborhoods to reflect, and they may not have the opportunity for a pricey school, all right, because it's, however they, do their financing, but it might be an opportunity to do work 4 days, go to school 1 day, go 1 day, 2 nights, 1 day, and have a rotation.
Absolutely.
And then, put, Philadelphians, instead of recruiting from all around where there's a shortage, we could draw from our own pool. It's just something going. The community risk reduction, part of the department in the EMS. What are they tasked with now? What is their responsibility? I've worked, and continue to work with them on the Act Now program. How do you see them evolving in the next couple of years under your leadership, or where do they fit into the fire department's role?
Councilmember, I think it's a great question. The Philadelphia Fire Department has a long history, which is a testament to my predecessors, of community risk reduction. A lot of that has been around fire prevention, and we've continued that tradition. We've installed, in the past 15 or 16 months, we've installed more than 25,000 smoke alarms. The other aspect of community risk reduction that's salient for us, and again, you've been talking about it, is emergency medical services community risk reduction. So we've been doing a lot of the things that you've been talking about, whether it's CPR training. We're part of the Ready CPR Coalition here in the city with a number of other partners. We are actually staffing or operating our alternative response units out of EMS community risk reduction. We've done bicycle helmet giveaways with different partners. We've talked with a number of folks about doing some drowning prevention activities as we get into the summer months. So in the long run, I think EMS community risk reduction is something we need to continue to build, and building capability for us means more staff. The challenge right now is everybody we take out of a paramedic unit in the street, we have to fill that spot with overtime with somebody who, again, probably is one of our incredibly dedicated firefighter EMTs or one of our incredibly dedicated paramedics who's picking up this overtime. But remember, they're working every minute of that overtime, they're working. And if anybody's interested in doing a ride along with any of our dedicated paramedics, we can certainly make that happen. So you'll see that. But in the long run, I think we really do want to continue to invest in risk reduction. And I think these alternative response units, with the little bit of time we've had with them already, I think we're really seeing, saving 100 transports or 110 transports in the course of 3 months may not sound like a lot when we're doing, a couple hundred thousand a year.
Runs, with the new units?
Yeah, we've offsetting some of those transports that otherwise would have, used up ambulance capability.
Now, I know what they are, and you had mentioned it, but I'm not sure for those who are watching this hearing knows what they are and what their responsibilities are. Can you explain that?
I will. So those are the two units I mentioned earlier, the alternative response unit that we've done as a partnership with Penn, that's basically taking lower acuity patients and taking care of them in a different way, so we don't have to commit an ambulance to transport them. The second unit is the one that I mentioned that is currently working in the Kensington area, where on its first day it was able to avert 4 transports, and we also got somebody on the first day, really not even before the first day, into treatment.
Now, who staffs those?
Those are staffed by firefighter. Well, they're staffed by paramedics, a combination of paramedics, EMTs, and then the AR2, the one that's working in the Kensington area as part of the Resilience Project, is actually also staffed with a nurse case manager. And I don't know what the specific job title. I'll say a social worker, for lack of a better word.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm.
Right.
I want you to say. I mean, you're using the I guess the best resources that you can to actually have the positive outcome of an unfortunate situation when you're responding to, I'm going to call it an incident, right? Or
having a better outcome, and also making sure that we're providing the right resource for that incident, instead of basically everybody goes to the emergency room, which is not good for the broader healthcare system and not good for us.
Just a couple last fire questions, if I could. So two things. One, your SOC unit command, we're increasing the personnel there, but we're decreasing the marine unit or boat unit, or is that so?
We're not decreasing. I'm not sure what that. We actually
or jobs eliminated from the boat. So I wrote a letter before. I live and I represent Engine 46, right? So, we were disappointed that, that one Marine unit or boat had left. Now, we're getting real high-quality type of boats. Can you explain that and how the SOC unit, I know that's not its only responsibility, but can you explain the increase in the SOC unit and the new boats for Marine deployment and response?
Right, we actually competed twice for 2 different federal port security grants out of the Port Security Grant Program, and we're buying 2 additional vessels. They're identical, one for our Marine Unit 1, one for our Marine Unit 2. And those will allow us to augment the capability. Both of those units have a circa 1948 fireboat as their primary vessel. We have a newer vessel at Marine Unit 1. However, that vessel has maybe proven less capable than we had hoped when it was purchased years ago. So the 2 new vessels or fast rescue boats that we're purchasing are going to allow us to get to areas, including the area you're talking about,
right,
much faster than waiting for the large boats to work their way up the river. Because of the additional vessels and because of our continued full-time staffing commitment, 24/7 staffing commitment, we didn't have the right, to your earlier point, span of control for those Marine units. So we have a position now to provide the right span of control for that. The other thing we're doing for the first time ever, again, thanks to the federal government and these port security grants, is providing shipboard firefighter training. We do have incidents aboard ship, whether it's at the Navy Yard or elsewhere on the waterfront. We've never had folks trained to do that. That's a highly specialized and extremely dangerous type of firefighting. We've just completed the 2nd round of that training, again, thanks to a federal port security grant. That's something the Philadelphia Fire Department's been trying to do since 1976. So I'm happy that we're able to do that. I think in the long run, as we look at our overall Marine deployment and capability, and we take non-seaworthy vessels out of service, which is the one that was at Engine 46's, was not seaworthy. I think we'll continue to look at...
I just want to say for the record, I think it was seaworthy, who knows nothing about boats. And I was sad to see it leave.
For a fire rescue
and
boat...
it's not a criticism. Yeah. I'm just, it's what Engine 46 had for such a long time. The community was, they felt a sense of comfort knowing that whatever kind of, balsa whaler or whatever, boat model it was, even though it was could have been a little dinghy or something, it was, within a half a mile from the water.
So I think that's a great point, is having something that is old does not a capability make. We also didn't necessarily have the right level of training for the folks there. As we've gotten these grants, we've gotten these trainings, and we continue to look at our overall deployment. We'll have to look at where to put the current assets for marine firefighting and rescue.
I'm going to put my number in for 46, if that means anything. The increase, which is fantastic, of our fire academy and its graph. So I'm sure everybody is extremely happy about that, and I know we're challenged with space, right, for the academy and their trainings. And are we looking at more of a permanent type, if we're going to be recruiting over the next couple of years, what are our more permanent solutions for expanding the academy? And I'll get to my second question after that regarding training.
Councilman, that's a great point. The academy, the current space, we can't really expand the space. There's nowhere to go. The water department is completely around, and then the police firing range is, the footprint we have on Pennypack Street is the footprint we're always going to have. So the first round of our master plan that was performed actually and delivered right when I got here basically supports what we believe, which is on that site we will only ever be able to do 50% of the required training. That site will only accommodate that 50%. So the balance of the training we need to do, we're looking at other places to accomplish that. The logistics hub is one of those. So if you think about it, another 25% of the training that we need to do will be accomplished at the logistics hub when that's built. And then the other 25%, we're looking at, the other way we're trying to do this is to geographically distribute our training locations. So we don't have to have companies going all the way up to Pennypack Street to do training. The logistics hub we anticipate will be more centrally located. And then we're looking for space in the southern part of the city where we can accomplish that other 25%. And this goes right back into, again, to the Council President's point, it's all connected. We have been talking with Budget and DPP about a facility, I'll say, in the vicinity of the Navy Yard, where we could have some additional support space for the southern part of the city, potentially combine our marine units. You know, our Marine Unit 2 is actually located in a corner of the refinery and, you know, not the best circumstances, and also get that other 25%. So that way the companies that are further south don't have to drive all the way across the city to get their training. So we're looking at all those options right now, which goes right back into your question about the Marine unit deployments, and whether or not that happens and when it happens affects the broader footprint of those resources.
And the training tower at the academy now, I know it was not in the best shape, and it could have been dangerous. I know Elle and I, a few years, have been out there. Has public property, has there been any work been focused in on that tower so we can, is it up and running, utilizing for training now, or is that part of the training that we're doing in?
That's part of what we're having to do at Lower Bucks.
And
So-
do we have is there a capital investment? Do they have a number? Do they know what it will take to bring it up to code for proper training safety?
Well, the number so that's part of the broader academy rebuild, and that number is
the hub logistics. Right?
$60
And I don't want a
million.
number. It's just it's been looked at. Is that correct?
It's been looked at. We've done what we can do. So the challenge is to make that existing building functional for the future. We would put more money into it than building a new one. And of course, where it is now, it's not on the site where we need to basically redo that entire site to accomplish that 50% of the training. So again, it's a matter of not putting a lot of money into a building that really needs to be demolished and rebuilt elsewhere on the site as part of the broader Fire Academy master plan.
Yeah, as long as it's in the master plan and we're working towards, a resolve.
Phase 2 of the plan,
safety.
I'm confident that working with budget, working with DPP, and over the next year with the planning dollars that we have available, we can come up with a way to phase across that site. So we're building some of the props that we need, including a burn building, and then, working across the site to having the space that we need to maintain the right throughput of cadets, both fire and paramedic, and do all the other training that we need to do, along with the field training components of the logistics hub, and then somewhere down south that we'll be able to create a sustainable, basically a sustainable workforce. And,
What's the
and
timeline
training
for the
mechanisms.
logistics hubs? In the perfect world.
That, Councilman, would really be a question for the Department of Public Property.
That will be a question for public property. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Mr. President, thank you. And just really a comment. Commissioner Teal and your staff, thank you very much for your service. I only see great things. I've had the opportunity to tour some of your facilities. I liked everything I saw. When my staff calls, your staff is always very attentive. And thank you and your officers for putting themselves on the line every single day to protect our safety and our property and our city as a whole. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. That is all the questions for today. I want to thank you very much for your testimony, and again, thank you for your service.
Great. Thank you all for your support.
This committee will stand in recess until Tuesday, May 7th, 2019 at 10 a.m., at which time we will reconvene in room 400, City Hall. Thank you all very much.